conversations over the last 2 days. We have seen how organizing can work to stop these operations from coming in. We've seen how vigilance and watchdogging can work to hold these corporations accountable. We've seen how reformed policy can quickly change the game. We've heard about how data tells the real story about these operations and the harms that they bring to communities. We've seen the power of building trust and relationships, sometimes with the unlikeliest of allies. We've seen the power of stories and lived experiences and voices, individual voices, and how that can really make a difference when we're advocating for something better for our future. We've seen the power of people coming together, as Jake just mentioned, building movement power, amplifying messages, and challenging the industry narratives by shining a light on the realities of this system. With that in mind, I think there's no better person that I can think of to close out this summit. Austin Frerick is a friend. He is a board member for SRAP. We're super happy and blessed to be able to have him on our board. He is also the author of Barons, Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry. Austin is an expert on agricultural and antitrust policy. During the 2020 presidential campaign, he advised candidates Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Pete Buttigieg. I just said that wrong. Buttigieg on agricultural policy before ultimately serving as co-chair of the Biden campaign's Agriculture Antitrust Policy Committee. He is a fellow of the Thurman Arnold Project at Yale University, an initiative that brings together faculty, students, and scholars to collaborate on research related to competition policy and antitrust enforcement. He also serves on the board of directors for Common Good Iowa and Socially Responsible Agriculture Project. Austin is a 7th-generation Iowan. His mother, Kathy, managed a beauty salon in his hometown of Cedar Rapids before opening her own bakery. His father, Scott, delivered and merchandised beer for a local family-owned beer distributor. Austin's passion for agriculture comes from spending weekends working with his grandpa Frerick. So Austin, I will let you take it from here.
Thanks for the introduction, Sherry. And it's totally because of my dad that I love grocery stores. So you should feel sorry for my husband, because when we travel anywhere in America, I love going to grocery stores and just seeing what's new and how companies merchandise. But yeah, so this is my book, just published about a month ago, Barons, as Sherry said. What I do is I talk about 7 different robber barons in the food system. And I use, it's not just the lifestyles of the rich and famous book. That said, there are some juicy details. But I use these robber barons as a way to tell bigger structural stories. So like, for example, Cargill is my grain baron. And unbeknownst to me until I started this project, Cargill's the largest private company in America. They're bigger than the Koch brothers. So I use their story to talk about the Farm Bill and how I argue that basically the Farm Bill is now designed for Wall Street at the expense of all of us. It's all about overproducing grains at the expense of everything else. So that's what I kind of do throughout the book. I have a coffee baron. I have Driscoll's as my berry baron. Walmart's my grocery baron. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at things. But what I really want to focus today's talk on is what do we do from here? Where do we go? Because I think, especially in this moment right now, given how dark the world is, people are craving a positive vision. And I think articulating that positive vision helps inspires people to overcome these robber barons. Because part of the reason why I wanted to use this robber baron framework is to show people we've been here before, we know what to do. And it's so cartoonish too. Like the fact that my dairy baron is Mike and Sue Mikulski. They created that brand Fairlife Milk. You might have seen it in the store. Well, it turns out they claim residency at the Puerto Rico Ritz-Carlton. And there's something morally wrong that it's someone who identifies as a dairy farmer lives at the Ritz-Carlton in Puerto Rico. So first thing first, and I know this was talked about in the last panel, but I can't say this enough, is not only the watchdog component to this kind of work, but building relationships with journalists, I think, is so crucial. You're never going to be dollar for dollar with a robber baron, but lean into that David versus Goliath narrative. A lot of journalists are barely getting by right now. They're asked to do a lot. They're not paid that much. The easier you make their life, the better. And then that comes in a few different ways. First, let them know about your victories. So when you beat a confinement person, or when you take something down, or you find something, brag about it. Reach out to journalists. Hey, just so you know, this happened. We did this. Keep in mind when you email journalists, always be respectful, be nice, but let them know, because assume that they just don't know, because so much is happening and they only have so much time. On the other side, let them know if you see something sketchy. If you're driving down the road and you're seeing a confinement doing something they shouldn't do, or it's illegal, or if they're putting manure on snow, give them a ring, give them a heads up. I've done that a lot personally. I mean, I'm pretty open at this point, where I'm personally repulsed by Secretary Vilsack. I think he really captures an awful mix of corruption and incompetency of this moment. And so I enjoy leaking stories on Vilsack to media, because it's, people like Vilsack will never do the right thing at the end of the day. You got to never forget the power of shame. Is a lot of these people that do corrupt behavior don't want their dirty secrets exposed. And then once you shine the light on it, that's a lot of power. And so flag it for journalists. Or if you see certain people being quoted in news outlets, for example, in Iowa, there's an academic at Iowa State. I talk about this in my book, Dermot Hayes. He's like the hog industry's go-to academic. So, for example, they're trying to speed up the kill lines in hog slaughterhouses, and he'll always say, "Oh, this is great. This is great for industry. This is good for Iowa farmers," which is just BS. I mean, we know this is a very dangerous job, and he's just trying to make it more dangerous. But what he doesn't disclose to journalists is he actually does business dealings with my hog baron. He is on the board for some of these companies. He's expert witness for some of these companies. So he's not disclosing to people that he has vested interest in the robber barons. So I mean, I send emails to these journalists just to let them know. I mean, things like that really do matter to journalists. They don't get quoted then. So that's kind of one of my first things is lean into this David versus Goliath moment. Have fun with it. I mean, it's kind of exciting when something you tell journalists gets published, So that's one thing you can do. And to me now, stepping back, bigger picture is, oh, thank you, Dana. Actually, let me just tell you one little example. Two things to make this really concrete. One is, you guys know that movie, the movie Fargo, there's that famous mulch stain. Well, a confinement person was doing that in Western Iowa with his dead pig bodies. And I mean, that's illegal. And he was just putting it on his farm fields. Well, an older woman I know was driving by, saw it, called the DNR in Iowa. DNR didn't do anything. So you know what she did? She called the Omaha TV stations. And that blew up on local TV news. And then that confinement owner got fined. The other example is right now the big thing in the Midwest are these carbon pipelines. Industry is arguing that they want to capture ethanol gas, transport it across up to the Dakotas and use it for fracking and call it good for the climate. Well, Secretary Vilsack's son was at the most elite law firm in Iowa, left that job and to make a lot more money working for one of these ethanol barons building these pipelines. Keep in mind, this model is only economically viable if daddy delivers. That type of corruption is just why so many people don't believe in the system anymore. A friend of mine, Flake, told me about that. There's actually his son updated his LinkedIn. A friend told me about that in Des Moines, Iowa, and I flagged it for journalists, and then Tom at Mother Jones reported it. Now people know. It was just a simple email. I let Tom, hey, just so you know, take this. He went down and explored it. Turns out there was a lot more going on there. So that is huge, because it's once you start shining light into this stuff, that's when the corruption comes light. And the beauty of this moment of the internet is a good news story URL never dies, so it's always out there. But anyways, talking about moving forward, so I talked about what you can do at the individual level, but the bigger picture is I see two big things. One, the silver lining of this moment, and I think it's been underappreciated, is the coming death of ethanol. Cars are moving to hybrids and EVs, electric vehicles. And they're moving pretty fast. I mean, there's all these stories now of China is producing electric vehicles cheaper than a normal car. But most people don't realize now it's the largest use of corn in America is ethanol. So that transition is going to happen fast. So we need to start thinking about now, what are we going to do with all that land currently in ethanol production? We see what the Vilsack types are trying to do. They're trying to put in the airplanes. I like to call people that think that ethanol is good for the climate flat earthers at this point, because we know it's just not. There's a reason why the Museum of Failure included ethanol in it. So to me, my big hope here is we use this as a moment to phase out CAFOs, confinements, put animals back on the land, which that's my favorite soundbite to use right now, because I'm pro-family farmer. Like I want to really, it's fun rhetoric to play with Farm Bureau, because you want the industry to essentially, why is the industry against family farms? Don't you want more farms? We all know it makes a better tasting food, better for rural communities, better for the environment, what have you. That to me is like the positive vision. Is I don't think either party right now has a positive vision for rural communities or the food system. And so really articulating this is what we should do as ethanol dies is one of my big projects, or like one of my big hopes, because there is going to be a moment where, you know, that moment is coming, and it's coming sooner than most people expect. And then the other big thing, and what I'm working on right now, is I really do think we should sunset the Farm Bill as it currently is. I'm not talking the food assistance programs. I'm just talking crop insurance, commodity programs, and conservation program. The fact that you get conservation dollars now for a hog confinement manure lagoon just tells you how broken it all is. To me, the best example of how wild it's, or how corrupted it's gotten, is crop insurance. Like, I view the Farm Bill now as a massive corporate giveaway where there's no caps on crop insurance. And unbeknownst to most people, when you hear the term crop insurance, you think, oh, bad weather, but it's really just insurance for against low prices. But keep in mind, Bill Gates is one of the largest owner of farmland now in America. So if he wants to grow corn and soy, he can get as much crop insurance as he wants. Keep in mind what this does too is it really pushes farmers to engage in grain and soy production at the expense of everything else. It kind of crowds out stuff. And I think it's been underappreciated how much ethanol has been destructive to the Midwest, and that it's pushed a lot of family farms off their pasture. How can you compete in rental prices, you know, against these industrial Bill Gates type operations doing corn and soy when you're just doing like a herd of, you know, cattle on pasture? So that to me is a big thing. Is just to me, take that money that's in the Farm Bill and put it into one big conservation program. You know, reward different types of things, but right now the Farm Bill picks favorites, winners and losers, and I would argue why it takes money now to be healthy in America. It's this obesity crisis. America is really rooted in the Farm Bill, where heavily processed food is cheap compared to fresh produce. And I know industry, the Farm Bureau types will love to say, oh, well, this system makes food cheap, cheap, cheap. That's just not factually true. That to me is like, that what really blew my mind, because I kind of assumed they were right. When you actually look at it, dollar for dollar per person, Americans spend more money on food, on groceries, than most Western democracies. We're actually about dollar for dollar equal with Italy. And trust me, when you go to these countries, what a dollar food gets you is way better than what you can get for like $1 at Dollar General in Iowa. But we should be surprised by that. I mean, these food markets in America are incredibly concentrated. And that is what monopolies do, is when they're concentrated, they gouge. I mean, I argue that there's one graphic I could include in my book. It would be the beef markets right now. The price for beef in the store keeps going up and up, but what that rancher gets is flat. And that is just classic textbook monopoly. So I love kind of pushing back on the industry on that, because it's just, I mean, that to me is the biggest thing I've seen in the last few months. It's just grocery store prices. I mean, I saw a bag of Lay's chips the other day for $6, which you just have to laugh at, because it's just a fried potato. But so that's kind of what I want to focus on, is where do we go from here? I view my book as, let's have an honest conversation over, this is where things are. One man does 5 million hogs in Iowa, but what do we do from here? What could the system be? It's a little corny. Some of you have heard me say this, but I really do think Iowa should be the Italy of North America. These rural communities have the best soil, beautiful brick towns. Let's lean into that. These communities were healthy when their money stayed in these communities. Because right now, rural America is producing the most it's ever produced, but none of that wealth is staying there. It's being extracted out. like my hog baron lives in Naples, Florida. My dairy baron has a home at the Ritz-Carlton. You know what I mean? Like this thing is, it's just wrong. Whereas family farmers who live in these communities, they pay taxes in these communities. They keep their money in these communities. And it's such a win-win, because I should also say, I don't want to romanticize the past. I know some people do that. I think there's really important lessons to learn. But moving forward is, how do we incorporate things from the past, but also embrace technology? Like there's gonna be more robotics in food and agriculture. That's fine, that's cool. I mean, you go to a modern combine today, these things are almost driving themselves. But what I promise you is robots can't do animals on pasture. I mean, sure, you might have a robotic milker, but one person can only look after so many cows. So that's kind of what I want to focus on. And I also just think it'll help take the temperature down in America. Who isn't happy after a good meal? One of my silver linings of writing this book was I did a lot of taste testings. So I would do like little milk samplings of industrial confinement milk, pasture milk, my dairy baron's milk. And inputs matter. When a cow eats a diverse array of grasses, it's going to make such a better product than a cow that's in the metal shed all day. And people notice that. So that's kind of my concluding remarks. I'm happy to take questions. If anyone has any questions or wants to follow up later too, my email is austin.frerick@yale.edu. My socials are Austin Frerick too.
Are there any questions for Austin before he gets up here? You can raise your hand, or you can put them in the chat or the Q&A. Anything here that you'd like to ask Austin? We have him for a few more minutes here.
Well, you guys think, 2 quick notes. So as you read the book, let me know if there's any good little juicy tidbits I missed. I always love hearing those stories. That's been one of the fun things of my book talk, is people come up afterwards being like, oh, you should really look here. I will note, to my knowledge, there's only one error in the book so far. So I have 1,000 footnotes, because if you're going to write a book like this, you got to cross your T's, dot your I's. But I opened my book telling the story of Julie Dunn, this woman in Iowa fighting back against hog confinements. And I say that she lives in Eldora, Iowa, but I accidentally wrote El Dorado. So I just want to let you guys know that. And then also, anyone that knows anything about Cisco or Cal Maine, let me know. I'm kind of toying around them as my next barons. But yeah, Sherry, do you have a question?
I do. Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a regenerative farmer here in Indiana, and he read your book, and he said he wished you would have included more solutions. So I'm curious what your ideas are for solutions and whether or not that's going to be your next book.
So to be honest, when I first started writing this first draft of this book, I didn't do too much solutions, but what I realized is I gave a keynote in Marble Seed a year ago, and just reading the room is people want solutions. Mm-hmm. So I did some of the conclusion, and I'm actually working on an article now fleshing out another idea more. So besides the whole farm bill, kind of junking or sunsetting the modern farm bill, thinking about life post-ethanol, putting animals on the land, my other big thing, or 2 more things I should say, is one, is using procurement power. Schools buy a lot of stuff, colleges buy a lot of stuff. How do we reward and stabilize people doing it right through those purchasing decisions? It's also just good politics. Who doesn't want all milk served in Indiana coming from Indiana dairy farmers doing it pasture versus like, New Mexico industrial dairy? And that's something you can do locally. And then the other thing is, I'm a big believer in personnel as policy. USA has a lot of political appointees, and who's in the room really does matter. So, with another election on the horizon in America, I encourage groups to start thinking about, who do you want in these positions of power? It's, when you're dealing with Vilsack types, it's a lot different than if you have someone like, if Mike Calcrate was, running GIPSA, just imagine what GIPSA would be doing. And so, but you guys start thinking those lists now. I encourage groups to think about, what seats do we want? Who's interested in serving in public service? What positions are important? All that kind of stuff. So that's the big thing, is because these conversations go a lot better with who's sitting at the table.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Looks like we do have a question in the Q&A here from Dana. There are quite a lot of good policies coming out of the current administration, but why is this admin is failing on transformative ag policy?
I think in agriculture or in food, you see both the best and worst of this administration. The best is, I think, the appointment of Commissioner Lena Khan to the FTC it's just been universally praised. I mean, I just reading today in the Wall Street Journal that Matt Gaetz is applauding her for her work on big tech, her work against these non-competes. I mean, this young woman is filing all these anti-monopoly cases against big tech. She's challenging the Kroger-Albertson merger. And not only that, I mean, she's a hero. I mean, she walks into these law schools in America and she fills a room. The kids just adore her. And like, she was just in Iowa last week to an audience of 100, hearing more about the pending Coke fertilizer merger. So that's huge. But on the flip side, I think it's Vilsack. I think Vilsack is I think a strong case could be argued that he is Biden's worst political appointment. I mean, this is what happens when you appoint an industrial dairy lobbyist as Secretary of Agriculture. You get someone behaving like they want to be a lobbyist again. I mean, I compare this the other day. I like to think of Secretary Vilsack like, if you remember the movie or musical Music Man, he's like Harold Hill. He'll tell you what you want to hear, but he doesn't mean a goddamn word he says. The fact is, the American meat markets have gotten more concentrated under this administration, which is just incredible to see, because I've seen I haven't seen a more bipartisan pinata saying hit me than tackle these meat monopolies these last few years. We saw what these companies did to workers during COVID. They're gouging farmers right now. Consumers have seen it at the store. And on top of it, they're not even American companies. I mean, JBS is my slaughtering bear in my book. They're the largest meat packer the world's ever seen. They became a monopolist through bribery. And like, these aren't even allegations. They pled guilty to bribing over 1,800 Brazilian politicians to become a monopoly. And what did Vilsack do? He made them pay a fine. And then I agree with Craig. They are felons. They are the closest thing we have in America to a modern day criminal organization operating as a corporation. That, to me, when I read that slaughtering baron chapter, I'm not even mad at them. I'm mad at Vilsack, because to me, they're just like a kid or a bully that was never said no to, and they keep pushing the envelope. And so people like Vilsack, yeah, they're throwing all these money at startups, but you are not going to get an ounce of market share against an organization as ruthless as JBS. Vilsack wants to pretend to care, but he doesn't want to really care. And to me, the scary thing here is not only have all these major meat companies bought more companies, Walmart is making these aggressive plays in the beef industry and dairy, because from everything I've heard, Walmart is PO'd at these slaughterhouses, and it knows USDA is incompetent. So it's taking action to its own hands. So that is like, we shouldn't depend on Walmart to save us, but that's where we are right now. And so that to me is why we are where we are, is in the food space, where there hasn't been progress, is honestly truly the appointment of Secretary Vilsack. And I think people need to know what people like him do is they'll tell you what you want to hear, but they also do this thing where they'll give a little money to people, or they'll bring you into the office, they'll pretend if you're heard. Just know that they're playing you. In the day, what are you doing to improve people's lives? I mean, I lost it the other day when I found out they slow walk these GIPSA rules that are coming out, which, I'm sorry, you worked on them for 8 years in the previous administration. Why could you not copy and paste them? And then when they announce them, they include chicken but not turkey. And then on top of it, the fact that one of his staffers blamed turkey farmers for not speaking up. Why? That is like so bothersome, because it's like, people spoke up. There was those famous 2009 hearings. They don't trust you. At this point, the burden's on USA to do something. The other thing to Sherry's question earlier about what to do on the solutions part, I'm really at the point now of stripping USDA for parts. By every metric, it's failed. It's failed farmers. What a farmer gets at the store is the lowest recorded in American history. It's failing eaters. It's failing our workers. The only thing it's succeeding at is helping Wall Street. So I think we should start taking away some of its power. Like, take away its meat antitrust authority. Give it to the Federal Trade Commission. It's proven it's incompetent at that job. Maybe take away SNAP. Give it to HHS. trust me, nothing scares a DC organization more than threatening to cut their budget. But I just think that's kind of where I'm at with USDA. There's a degree of incompetency I do not have time for anymore. Sorry, that's like a rant, but
That's great. Wonderful. I think we're getting really close to time. Is there any final questions or thoughts here before we go? I think we're getting really close to being respectful of people's time and contribution to this, but I think we all appreciate you, Austin. So,
oh no, I mean, this call is full of people that, I mean, this book is, I was able to write a book like this because there's people on this call. I mean, I kind of view a lot of academics guys kind of useless in this space. You know, there's so much corporate money sloshing around these land grants, but it's journalists and longtime farmers, longtime people in this space that, you know, they know where everything's at. They'll tell you where all the bodies are buried. And so, I mean, I'm so indebted in this book to that. I mean, you can kind of, if you read between the lines, you can kind of see our calf's influence on my slaughtering chapter, milkweed's influence on my dairy chapter, all that kind of good stuff. So thank you guys. Keep up the good work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Austin. Sherry, do you want to take us out here as we finalize things here?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for to everyone here, the participants, the organizational allies, to our speakers, to the SRAP staff, who I'm forever indebted to you, Mark, for helping facilitate this entire program. I walk away from these events feeling inspired, slightly exhausted, but super inspired. And I really do think, you know, we're facing an incredible battle in this work, but I also believe that we have seen what we can do when we band together and we're talking about it, and we know what we need to do in order to work together and to stay vigilant and to keep on this path. So I think, you know, just for everyone who's not with SRAP, please come to our website, get in touch with us. Let's figure out how we can continue to work together. It's sraproject.org. Get on our newsletter list, donate if you can. We need all the support we can get in order to do this important work, but you know, just stay with us and figure out a way that we can build, you know, movement power and really look at policy and look at organizing our communities and think about what we can do on a state level, et cetera. There's just so much work to be done, and we need everyone at the table. These stories, these lived experiences, these voices, we need all of this to bring to the table. I'm super jazzed about the conversation around data and what we can do with that as we move forward. So, you know, we're stronger together. So I just want to kind of leave it with that. Thank you all so much for you know, joining us these past 2 days. And find a way, please, to stay in touch with us, and let's look at what we can do as we move forward. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.